Mm.
All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a couple of intro slides too, so if some latecomers are coming in, they won't miss anything too important. We're just going to get through some logistics to start. But first of all, thank you all for joining us today for Best Practices to Engage Spanish-Speaking Families. My name is Melissa Greiner. I'm the head of marketing over here at Campus ESP. I'm just very happy to welcome you all to join us today for what I think is going to be a really fun and exciting panel with three of our colleges that we are proud to work with, who all happen to be HSIs and all work very strategically and thoughtfully with their Spanish-speaking populations. And hopefully they'll be able to share some interesting best practices and ideas for you. Just so everybody is aware, this is a Zoom webinar style presentation, which means that I can see the panelists and I can see myself, but I cannot see any of our attendees. So your lines are also on mute. I cannot hear you. If at any point during this presentation you have a question, we highly encourage that. The Q&A feature is available for you to put in those questions. We may stop and ask those during the presentation. We may say we're going to hold those towards the end, but rest assured we will make sure that we do take all those questions in and make sure you get the answers that you need. And this is always the most popular question, but yes, we are recording this. Everybody will get a copy. If you have to leave early for whatever reason, or you have a colleague that you want to share this with, you will have a recording in your inbox by the end of this week that you can share with whoever you feel would be enjoying this presentation. Just a little bit what we're going to go through today. First, we're going to kind of introduce you to the group that is joining us. Then we're going to dive right into it. We're going to go through 4 of the best practices to engage Spanish-speaking families. These are all examples, real-life scenarios that are being done by these institutions that are working for them and resonating with their families, and that hopefully you can bring to your campus. And then, of course, at the end, we will do any additional Q&A if things didn't get answered during the presentation. So this is our amazing panel that I'm so excited for you guys to hear from today. So first, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Harris, who is my esteemed colleague. She's an account management lead here at Campus ESP, but also was a former user of the platform. So Elizabeth, why don't you say hello first?
Great. Thanks, Mel. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I see some familiar names on this list. So hello, especially to anyone that I work with directly. I've been at Campus ESP now for about 2.5 years. And as Mel mentioned, I was a user of the platform at Temple. I work directly with some customers to ensure that they're getting the most out of the platform and meeting their goals. And one of the most common goals that I hear recently is around wanting to engage Spanish-speaking families. So I'm excited to dig into this topic today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We also have joining us today Javier Flores from Texas Women's University. We have Kirsten Hollis from New Mexico State. And we have Maggie Thom and Micheline Pennington, who are both from Northern Arizona University. And I'm going to let them talk a little bit about their schools and their roles here on this next slide. Take us forward. As you can see, we have 3 different institutions joining us today, varying a bit in size and shape and location, but all really focused on serving the population of the Hispanic and Latinx populations that they have large populations of. Sorry, that's a lot of words, population in one sentence. So Javier, why don't you start us off and talk to us a little bit about Texas Women's?
Well, good morning, buenos dias to everyone. It is wonderful to see everyone here today. I am Javier Flores. I serve in the role of Vice President for Enrollment Management at Texas Women's University, a mid-sized public institution with a purpose statement, educate a woman, empower the world. We are a co-ed university. We have been a user of Campus ESP since July of 2021. I was also engaged in bringing Campus ESP at my previous institution as well. And here at Texas Women's University, we are the 5th most diverse university in the United States with an enrollment of 34% Latinx students. I myself am a first-generation low socioeconomic Latinx student. Great to be here today.
Thank you. Let's move on and learn a little bit more about New Mexico State.
Okay. Sorry, would not unmute. Hi, I'm Kirsten Hollis. I am the Family Outreach Coordinator Senior here at New Mexico State University. We have, I've been here in this role for about a year. I've been at other institutions prior to this doing other roles. But I have made it my mission that if we are going to be an HSI institution, that also means that we need to make sure that we are aggressively meeting the communication needs of our Hispanic families. And I'm also doing that by working on a second bachelor's in Spanish. And so now I am hoping to very soon, by the end of the semester, be able to speak more of the first grade level rather than a kindergarten level. So, but I'm kind of slowly dragging the rest of my institution along with me at making sure that we're meeting the needs of our Hispanics and Latinx families.
Great. And then Micheline and Maggie, why don't you tell us a little bit about NAU?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Maggie Tom. I'm a program director at Northern Arizona University for FACTS. That stands for Family Access, Communication, Transition, and Support. Our institution is vision-driven around delivering equitable post-secondary value in Arizona and beyond. We have a population of just above 28,000 students. We're a public institution located in Flagstaff, Arizona. And of our population, 44% of our students identify as first generation. So those are some interesting facts about us, and I'll pass it over to Micheline.
Hi, good morning and afternoon to some of you. My name is Micheline and I work with Maggie in the FACTS program as a program coordinator. So thank you all for being here today.
All right, and now here comes the very quick part where we talk to you a little bit about Campus ESP. I promise it'll be as fast as I possibly can get it out of my mouth. But if you are not familiar with us, it always helps to a little bit of context as to why we're talking about family engagement here and why we are so invested in it. Campus ESP is a platform and software that we provide to higher education institutions to really help them grow, scale, and build their parent engagement strategy. We do this really to help them improve any of their institutional goals, from early things like enrollment through the student success cycle up to graduation and beyond. We do this by helping to engage families with personalized content that comes out of our portal and through our newsletters and other emails that we're sending to families. We nudge their behavior to help them know what's going on, what needs to happen next, and help them support their student through those different parts of the journey. And we really provide the institutions back with a ton of data on what families are looking for, engaging with, responding to, so they can continue to scale that strategy and serve the needs of those populations. We are really, really proud to work with over 350 different institutions in the US, which means that we are serving about 7 million families throughout all of those different schools, which is an amazing honor to have. We're really happy to be able to help so many schools and families navigate the higher education journey. And if after this webinar, you're starting to think more about how you want to engage all kinds of families on your campus, I do just want to point you in the direction of our website. We have a ton of resources there. We have independent research. We have case studies from different customer schools, webinar recordings from webinars that we've done in the past, but a bunch of information that you can use there to your disposal to help you come up with some new ideas and maybe do something a little bit different as you approach the school year. So the blog is campusesp.com/blog, very obvious, but campusesp.com, click around, find some fun new things later today. And with that, I'm going to hand things really over to Elizabeth, and she's going to get deeper into our topic today.
Thanks so much, Mel. So before we get started with talking through a few of the best practices, we wanted to give a little bit of context behind why we chose to do this topic today. As I mentioned at the beginning, as an account manager at Campus ESP over the past 2.5 years, it seems like more and more the topic of comes up whenever we talk to institutions about what their goals are, is to increase access and communication to Spanish-speaking families. And the reason behind that really is because Hispanic enrollment continues to be on the rise. As you can see here, that the number of institutions the number of students enrolling at institutions continues to increase. There's really this strong a strong line going up here, but I wanted to definitely talk also about the fact that the number of Hispanic serving institutions is also on the rise. So anyone who doesn't know, Hispanic serving institutions are institutions, HSIs, so we're probably going to continue to use that term throughout the call today, that enroll at least 25% of their undergraduate population does identify as Hispanic. And across the board for who we have on the call today, there are different times in which they have become, these institutions have been designated with that HSI title. And I know NAU in particular, just recently, within the few past years, received that. Maggie, Micheline, can you talk a little bit about that recent designation?
Yeah, so we're really excited to be part of a network of 14 HSIs here in Arizona that serve our Latinx community. And we have a kind of a two-part story. So our NAU Yuma branch was actually designated in 2007, and then NAU in its entirety joined that designation in 2021.
Great. Kirsten or Javier, is there anything you'd like to add there about TWU or New Mexico State?
I'll just add that as a Hispanic serving institution here at Texas Women's University, we have received 2 grants. One is the POA grant, which is promoting post-baccalaureate opportunities for Hispanic Americans, and that's only for graduate students, a $3 million grant over 5 years that will increase STEM engagement and enrollment among all of our students, but specifically among our Hispanic students, and then also a undergraduate Title V grant specifically for nursing that will bring the nursing program specifically here to Denton, Texas, as we already have it in Houston and in Dallas. So being a Hispanic serving institution has allowed us to leverage some of the federal grant dollars so that we can increase our capacity to better serve our Latinx and Hispanic students.
Great. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And on top of that, many schools are expected to receive that HSI designation in the coming years. As you can see, there are 401 emerging Hispanic serving institutions. And with that continued growth in Hispanic enrollment, most will become HSIs within the next decade. So we'll continue to see the trend and the need to provide access to parents and families and supporters of the students who are attending these institutions as enrollment continues to increase year over year. Great. And the data even shows that Spanish-speaking families are more engaged than the overall family population at all 3 of our participating universities today. Within their engagement rates in campus ESP, you can see that Spanish-speaking families are at least have at least 5% higher open rates. But what really sticks out to me is the higher click rates, too, that these families have, especially at NAU. You can see that the average click rate is 4.6% for their overall families. But then when you take a look at those Spanish-speaking families, they are really engaging with the content and engage in looking for that support to help serve their students. And I know Javier, whenever I first met him at the RNL conference, so last year, I believe, told me this great story about how his mom made such an influence in his educational journey by being involved in college. And I think that would be a great opportunity to share that, if you don't mind, Javier.
Absolutely. And so thank you, Elizabeth, for allowing me to share that story. And please bear with me if I become emotional. My mom was a retention agent for the university that I attended, and they didn't even know it, and she didn't really know that either. So specifically, Mother became involved with the Parent Association at the university that I was at and received a newsletter every week. So when I first moved in, and I moved in early because I was in the marching band, there was already a welcome packet uh, on my bed with my mom's broken English. This is an individual who only went through the 8th grade, and her English was not proficient. And then on my first birthday, she also had a cake waiting for me in the lobby of the residence hall. And yes, I'll say residence hall. That's to all my housing folks. I didn't say dorms. So it was waiting for me in the residence hall. And then also at the end, like in October or November of my first year, Mom said, so Mijo, have you already seen the academic advisor? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so she was prepping me to get ready to go and see the academic advisor and enroll for the spring semester. And then every semester there after that, she asked me, and then my senior year, she's like, okay, have you like signed up for graduation and had your degree audit? And she knew all the things that were required that sometimes we see as bureaucratic processes, but she saw that an opportunity to make sure that I knew the information and I was getting things done.
Great. I love that story. And I think it shows, the data can speak for itself, but also those stories behind how it makes such a difference in individual students' journeys, and being able to families to be that retention effort can really make all of the difference. So thank you for sharing that, Javier. All right. So now we're going to get into some of the best practices that we've identified after talking to all three of these institutions, as well as some of the other best practices we see from some of our other customers that are engaging Spanish-speaking families. And one of the first ones that we'll speak about is collecting data on the family communication language preferences of these families. And so we'll walk through a few examples of how the folks here have been able to do that. So one of those pieces is to reach out to families from the start. So I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, and it's a question that I hear a lot from customers, is we might not know who needs the Spanish language content and how to get that information so that you are providing that access from the beginning. And so oftentimes, and as more and more institutions are collecting family data early on during campus visits, during parent requests for information forms, on applications, during orientation, one of the best things to do is to simply ask what language preferences are. And that can really help that family member get to the information that they need in a way that they are able to understand and then support their student. I believe this example that we see here is from Northern Arizona University. And Micheline has a good story behind some feedback that she received from a student on how this made a difference in his his own experience.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We're really excited to have our flyers for the hub in both English and in Spanish. And we have campus partners and NAU-wide partners across the state who get these flyers out to families and high school counselors. And so we're really thankful for our NAU community with that. We use this on campus events as well. And I was at a transfer visit fair just last spring, and I met this really wonderful student, and I was telling her about the hub. And then she looked over at her family and called their dad over, and she started telling him in Spanish about the Lumberjack Family Hub, and his eyes lit up because she was telling him about how we had resources in Spanish for him. And so I handed them our Spanish flyer, and they got even more excited. She didn't need to translate anymore. And he realized that this resource was for him. And I think that's really important because we hear a lot from our students about how they are often translating things throughout the college readiness process and even while they're here to help their families understand. And so I think it's very impactful to have resources that are for their families. And then kind of speaking to Javier's story, having their family having access to that information so they can provide it to their student is really powerful. So
great. Thanks, Micheline. All right. And then the other piece is take advantage of registration events. So the previous slides were a little bit more focused on requests for information, the application, anything along that line. But there's definitely opportunities across the board to ask that as well. So New Mexico State does a great job at collecting that on the orientation registration that families fill out, or maybe their student can fill out for them whenever they register. And then, of course, within Campus ESP, whenever there is that onboarding experience, there is the opportunity to ask if they are a Spanish-speaking family, and then for those families to be added to a specific community, or for those that aren't familiar with the community language in Campus ESP, that just means how a communication is targeted so that they can receive content in their language. So I'm curious, Kirsten, if you can talk a little bit about the orientation process, and then how you go about that orientation experience too at New Mexico State.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we do is we have selected orientation sessions where our programming is offered in both English and Spanish. And it's just a parallel. Everything's pretty much identical. It's just which language the presenter is presenting in. And so when the students register for orientation, we ask them whether their family member would prefer English or Spanish. On the times that we only offer the orientation presented in English, we always have people available. They're running around with buttons on, saying that they can answer questions in Spanish, and that they are, our Spanish speaking staff members. So regardless of which orientation they're coming to, the families can quickly identify who they can come and speak to as a resource. But the other thing that I do with this is then I automatically upload anybody who has indicated Spanish as a preferred language into our community for Spanish speaking families. And this way I can make sure that when I am directing information out of campus from Campus ESP, either, usually announcements or texts, I can target them specifically to make sure that they're getting the information in Spanish. And because they're already in the general community, they'll also get it in English. They're getting it bilingual, but it kind of, instead of waiting for them to identify and sign themselves into the community, they don't have to try to find it.
Great. Thanks, Kirsten. And I love that around how you're using data that already exists to pull them into that community off the start, rather than just having to rely on the self-designation, if you do have that information, to make it an even easier experience for those families. Thanks. All right, so now we're going to move on to best practice number 2. Make it easy for families to find important resources in Spanish. So that even starts earlier on. So we talked about collecting information during campus visits, requests for information forms, but I know Texas Women's recently just developed this digital search piece in Spanish to be able to build that relationship with those families even before their student attends Texas Women's University. So can you speak, Javier, to the goals of this recent piece that you all created?
Absolutely. So, it's really tied to the data. And you saw earlier that we also have a survey. So we use the information that we collect, which, by the way, Campus ESP has done a great job of automating the data that is coming into us, and then data that we are sending back, so that we can really analyze that data. So the kind of the secondary or the outcome of using our data is to improve communication. And so we are enhancing communication so that it directly leads to a higher yield in enrollment, a higher yield in retention, and a higher yield in graduation. And I'm so sorry, I just moved into a new office that has a timer on my lights, and so that's why I went dark. And so with our graduation and with all of our students, but especially this resonates well with our Hispanic families, is we want students to graduate in 4 years or less with the lowest amount of debt. And this past May, our students that graduated in May, 43.4% had no student loans at all. And so that is the type of data and information that we can share with our parents early on. So this search piece is really just to let our parents and our students know what academic programs we have, and then what financial support we have, and then also what support services we have.
Great. That's an amazing stat. I feel if any family member hears that, I think that's definitely a reason to, encourage a student to look at Texas Women. So great. Right. So the next one is to think about how families Google. So how they're inputting their Google search and how then that leads into the content that appears whenever they do that search. And so Texas Women, or not Texas Women's, apologies, Northern Arizona University just recently created the first university in the state to have a Spanish site built from the ground up, which is just amazing that there is all of this access for these families to get all of the information that that is available in Spanish. So can you speak to the goals of this a little bit, Maggie or Micheline?
Yeah, definitely. So most families start looking at college through Google. I think we all use Google. So the thought behind the website is Spanish-speaking families are no different. So how do we ensure that they have access to information if they're inputting word searches in Spanish? So we launched NAU on Espanol in March of 2023. It was fully created in Spanish by our dedicated HSI team, which is led by university marketing. They worked with partners throughout the university to launch. And the mission behind that, again, is just that our institution believes and recognizes the importance of meaningfully and very strategically serving Hispanic students, our Hispanic faculty, staff, and the communities throughout our region. So while an HSI designation is based on enrollment, we want to ensure that our students are supported to also retain and graduate. To Javier's point, it's not enough to just get them through the door. Therefore, we work really hard to ensure that accessible information is available from the start of recruitment through to graduation. The website is a part of that. It's also a reason that we picked Campus ESP. That was chosen as it's super complementary to our institutional-wide strategies, like the website, for an end-to-end experience for our families.
And that ties into this next slide around remember, we were having conversations around how do you get family, if you don't always have the family data, how can you make sure that they know that that you're doing such great work with translating most of the content into Spanish. So can you speak to kind of about some of the goals with this advertisement in the newsletter that drove families into joining the Spanish-speaking community?
Yeah, so one of the things we're really excited about in using Campus ESP is that we can have unique communities for our Spanish-speaking families. So we actually have two. We have one for hopefully future lumberjacks, and then we have one also for our families of current lumberjacks. And oftentimes families will join the community by completing an onboarding form, and we know that not all families are going to complete that form. Maybe they're not comfortable self-identifying, and so we wanted to have a way to make the Spanish information and resources accessible and comfortable to access. And so we created these little campaigns or advertisements that go at the top of each newsletter. So families receive these in each newsletter. They're actually little GIFs, so the little hand moves. The family can click there, and then it will take them to that community. From there, they can join the community, so they can opt in to continue receiving that information, or if they don't want to join the community, they'll just continue to join it each time they go into the newsletter and click. And then when they go into the community, they can see all of the posts and articles that are in there. So yeah.
Thanks. And I know that the number of folks in that community since you created that advertisement has definitely increased. So I think this is something for the Campus ESP customers on this call that is something that's super easy to create. It will only take a few minutes and you can start seeing results pretty quickly. So time is at an essence for a lot of folks in student affairs. So this is definitely one that can be only take a few minutes to do. Great. And the next piece that we have is to consider text messaging. So we're seeing through some research that we do with RNL is that 44% of enrolled families are saying that they would like to receive text messaging from their institution. And that is a trend that continues to increase year over year as well. But Hispanic and first-gen families, that number is even higher. And so New Mexico State does a great job at texting families and sending some of those messages in Spanish as well. And Kirsten, can you just speak to a little bit about what your strategy is here, how you choose which messages to send out in Spanish?
Yeah. So one of the things that I tend to do, I don't tend to, just because we don't have the resources right now to send out newsletter articles, but I've taken the approach that because the furthest duration between receiving a newsletter is about a month for when families select things, that anything that I want to make sure families see in less than a month goes out as an announcement. And so it's more so the announcements that I send out, both in English and Spanish, and especially when I have a link that they can click onto. Those are the ones that I really tend to choose for text, because people will look at their email and go, yeah, I'll go back to that later, but they're more likely while they're standing at the grocery store to click a link and look at something from a text message and see that information immediately. So it's basically anything that I need them to know in less than a month's time gets done as an announcement, but then anything that is great to read while they're standing in line at the grocery store then kind of becomes the text message, or something that I really need to make sure that they get more immediate. For example, we're going to open family and friends weekend registration on Monday. That's something that they're really going to need to know, or would want to get more the information more quickly, and a text usually does that. The challenge with this is thinking strategically far enough in advance that I can have the people who translate everything for me available and have the time to translate it, because they also have full-time jobs. This is, our admissions team is kind of where I'm pulling to get my stuff translated. And so sometimes they may be on the road and may not be available. So I really have to think a couple of days in advance before I send something out. So it's normally not something that I can just go, oh, I have this great idea, let me send this out in 5 minutes, because it's really not going to happen. But that's kind of the approach that I've taken and the resources that I've used.
Right. And that ties into a question that we received in the Q&A around the fact that if you do have those limited Spanish speakers at your institution and you don't have access to translation resources, how to select what to send, what to prioritize in spending, creating content in Spanish. And I know that's also a question that we hear a lot from our customers too, is how can, it's something I really want to do. This is a goal of mine, but we just don't have the time and resources. And so I'm wondering if anyone else has some tips or advice for how folks can get started.
One of the things that I've done, and then I'm going to punt it to Javier, is I've prioritized it if it has something to do with paying a bill, if it has something to do with filling out their FAFSA, if it's things, and I also kind of prioritize getting ready for graduation, where Javier was saying that his mom said, did you sign up for graduation? because these are the things that are really important to making sure that a student is able to stay enrolled. My secondary, is making sure that they're aware of information surrounding advising appointments. And so I don't always have the resources to do some of this, but I've tried creating some relationships with people to figure out who can do this. But I know that based on some conversations that we had, before when we were talking about this earlier this week, Javier also has some comments that he had made about making sure that we're getting the right tone and that we're not just pulling people who may know something, because you can accidentally end up saying the wrong thing. So Javier, do you want to add on to that?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I think one of the misnomers is that Spanish is Spanish, right? But Spanish is very dialect intensive. And so there are different dialects based on different regions. And Hispanic is just an umbrella. It could be European, it could be South America, it could be different regions, even within the United States. And so I think part of it is to know your audience, your target audience. Going back to the data, we know Latinx or Hispanic families in the Houston area and how they differ from the Dallas area and perhaps a different dialect, because maybe they come from a different part of South America. I would say the other thing that we do is we look for champions on campus that perhaps do not have the time to translate in writing, but are willing to do a video or translate something verbally, which would really then begin to help as we are communicating with families where perhaps there are still individuals like my dad who was illiterate and couldn't read or write in either English or Spanish, but listening to the information would educate him on those items that he needed to know. So those would be my takeaways: is look to see who on campus in different divisions, different departments can help you. Also give out those cell phone numbers so that parents can text you instead of a mass text, and that would be specific to questions. I received many texts in Spanish this summer that were specific to financial aid or payment deadlines and et cetera.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in real quick. I have the SMS text number through Campus ESP on my business card. And then we also post that when we're doing presentations. So.
And a question that came up kind of tied to that is, do you ever have concerns about capacity of questions in Spanish and not having the personnel available to assist when those questions are asked? And like, say, in response to those text messages, Kirsten?
I don't, only because within our student staff in our office, we have 2 native Spanish speakers. So even though I may not be able to get the presentation level of Spanish response for everything, I definitely have the conversation. We can answer this immediately, or when we do our monthly Zoom sessions, we always have somebody in there who can translate and can answer questions in Spanish. But a lot of that's because I'm fortunate enough to have a couple of Spanish speaking students on my staff, as well as the various Spanish speakers that I have within the admissions office that I work in. So some of it is kind of cultivating that. The other thing that I learned is that at New Mexico State University, the departments have the option of giving a slightly higher pay rate to salaried employees who speak Spanish in order to help recruit people into the offices, especially, financial aid and billing or accounts receivable, and, so that we have at least somebody in these offices who can, in fact, assist with this.
Right. That's a great incentive. That's an incentive for folks to be able to help. And we definitely have a few more questions that are coming up in the chat. We're going to go through a few more few more slides, and then we'll get to any questions in the remaining time that we have after that. All right, so the next best practice that we have uncovered is to offer events and presentations in Spanish if possible. We've kind of already touched on some of these pieces. Everything is intertwined, but whenever, and some of it will definitely rely on the ability to have access to translators or folks that can lead these types of events in Spanish, but our participants here have had some great experiences with providing access to some of these items. So this first one is for a presentation at Texas Women's University that folks receive during the admissions process or during the orientation process. Can you speak to this one a little bit, Javier?
Absolutely. So the línea de tiempo is just a timeline. And so like one of my colleagues indicated that they work with Campus ESP with prospective students and then currently enrolled students and their families. We do the same thing. So this really becomes something that we start with our prospective students, but then we're also working on a timeline that will guide our families and students from the first year enrollment all the way to graduation. So what are some of the things that you have to do and when do they become available? Seeing an academic advisor, registering for classes, payment deadlines, applying for FAFSA again each year, and so forth. So we use this at recruitment and orientation. And we have recently, our Marcom department has hired an individual that is fluent in Spanish, so is a Spanish copywriter. So we'll have that individual help us with presentations, but then also our marketing. You're beginning to see billboards in Texas for Texas Women's University that are in Spanish as well.
Great. And I've definitely seen some more posts being shared within within Campus ESP from some folks on your team around different events that are in Spanish. So I think as tying back into what to prioritize in translating, whenever maybe you can only do one a week, at this time of the year in the enrollment cycle, particularly sharing information about campus visit days is something that can really help move the needle. So and have a great impact. So focusing on that retention impact or what can help nudge behavior from students during the enrollment cycle can definitely help in prioritizing what to focus on. And then there's also this awesome financial aid presentation that Texas Women's has recently started to do that goes out into the community to make connections with families. Can you speak to this one a little bit, Javier?
Absolutely. So this was our effort to work with the school districts that indicated that they have programs for parents that do not speak English, that only speak Spanish. And so I know that there was a question about, do we have an institutional term and vocabulary? And yes, we do. And we're starting to go through each different section, admission terms, financial aid terms, scholarship terms, and et cetera. And this is where we will use individuals that work here at Texas Women's University that are from different areas, someone from Puerto Rico or someone from South America or someone from Mexico, to see if the terms are correct or if we need to adjust those as well. And so this was a financial aid presentation, but I can tell you when we met with the parents, they were asking about AP courses, they were asking about dual credit, they were asking about things that were beyond financial aid, but were all connected, and they were just simply trying to get their students to be ready, college ready, and to be more likely to graduate. And it was beautiful.
I love that, going out and making those connections early on and meeting them where they're at in the community. All right. And this is an example from New Mexico State, an announcement that was sent out via Campus ESP and some webinars that are hosted as they're starting the transition into college for families that are held both in English and Spanish. Can you speak about this a little bit and the impact that it has had on your families, Kirsten?
So the Ask Me Anything is our monthly Zoom series, and it's, a panel discussion, much like this, on different topics. And so in order to make sure that families know that it's happening, we send it out in both an English and Spanish announcement. At this time, I always have somebody on the panel who can speak Spanish so that we can answer their questions. And I'm working with Disability Access Services because they had a recommendation for me about how I could tap into a translator or a translator thing with Zoom so that the text is automatically being translated during the event. I haven't quite had a chance to figure that part out yet. So right now it's just that we have somebody available. The other thing that we always let them know is that if they're not able to attend, they can submit their questions and then we can answer those on camera while, in the middle of the Zoom. And so it's still kind of a building thing. And then I was trying to have, although I didn't quite manage to pull it off this summer, I will definitely for next summer, is to have a session for the incoming families that is just instead of having a topic, just be ask me anything as you're, moving your student on campus, but have it completely offered in Spanish. And basically we could have an English translator if we need to. So
I think that's a great example of it might not be perfect. It might not be exactly what you want it to be, but leveraging the resources that you do have available. And that kind of ties into a lot of the questions that are coming through the chat is what to prioritize and whenever there are those limited resources. So the fact that, yes, it would have been great to be able to have them in Spanish too. Having someone there and available is better than not having anyone there at all. So I definitely appreciate that.
And that is the biggest lesson that I have learned myself this year is sometimes done is better than perfect. Mm-hmm. And so instead of waiting until I can do this exactly the way that I really want to, just doing what I can and starting now instead of waiting. And I think sometimes we're so focused on, but it's not right, or it doesn't meet everything that I want out of this. So we don't actually do the anything. So don't let that stop you. On the other hand, make sure it doesn't have terms that aren't going to be well received. So there is a certain level of, make sure you got a certain level of proficiency, but don't let perfection stop you.
Absolutely. And something that we've talked about a lot today that has come up is that campus partners can definitely be critical resources in helping you achieve your goals, whether it be through translation services or going for advice on the correct terminology, anything along that line. And you definitely can have those advocates in areas of campus, whether it be, a colleague down the hall or even, university president and the first lady, which is exactly the example that we have here from Northern Arizona University. Would love to hear a little bit more, Maggie and Micheline, about how your office has directly partnered with the president and the first lady and the impact that that's having across the board.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that we're always really excited about. We consider ourselves super lucky. Our campus leadership, including both our president, Dr. Jose Luis Cruz Rivera, and his wife, Dr. Rima Brusi, They're both super passionate about access. They're always eager to get involved to ensure that our Spanish-speaking families both have access to resources and also feel a sense of belonging here at NAU, that we're very inclusive. So an example on this slide is showing our welcome video. This goes out to people who sign up for the Lumberjack Family Hub. And it's our president talking to families about the hugely important role that they play in the success of their student, and how we as an institution really want to help support them on that journey as well. Suggestions that we would give you on how to get leadership involved. First, we ask them for their participation, obviously, by sharing with them what information or resource we really want to share with families. We then utilize our community around campus and networks to validate and co-create our content. So that could be student affairs or academics, that could be people within enrollment management, just depending on the content and messaging that we're wanting to send out. We then sit down and we create the content ourselves, and then also connect with the appropriate communications team to get them on board, make sure that everything is looked at for grammar and language. We then get it translated. We are really lucky in the instance that we do have a translator that does all of our translating for us. And then we reach out to the president's team or Dr. Brucey's team to get the time scheduled. So I think that leadership obviously works in education because they're super passionate about it. And I think being able to talk to them about the passion that you have for the families that you're serving, I think you'll find that they have that same passion. So we try to just make it as easy as we possibly can for them by organizing, creating, and getting everything scheduled as in advance as we possibly can. So they just have to show up and help out with the content portion. We've never been turned down on that. They're usually really excited to do it. And we have about 34, in addition to our leadership, we have about 34 campus partners throughout the university that we work with pretty much on a month-to-month basis. Another suggestion that I know we do that helps us is just that we request content in English 4 to 8 weeks in advance of when we're posting it. And that's to ensure that we have that turnaround for translation. And that does seem like a really large lead time, but all of our campus partners have been super excited and are super proud to be able to put so much content in Spanish for our families. So they're really awesome about getting us that content in advance. We've been super blown away by the support and excitement of our campus community. And Micheline, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't think so, except you made me cry a little bit. So I'm just gonna myself again.
Yeah, we really are super lucky. And I think that you'll find that the more people you talk to around your university, you know, we all work in education for a reason. So finding like-minded people that are super passionate about accessibility is not as hard as I think it sounds.
Maggie and Micheline, just this, their team has only been around for about a year or so. They're fairly new to campus CSP, and I think they've done just a great job at building those relationships and getting that buy-in. So I think not to speak for them, but I think they're a great example of someone, if you're looking, getting buy-in from campus partners and building those relationships is something that has been a challenge to you. I know that's something that we hear a lot. They're definitely a great example of how of a school that has successfully been able to do that in a pretty short amount of time.
And I will say too, I was just going to say, if you do have networking questions, Micheline is like a networking queen at this content stuff. So I'm sure she would love to talk to anyone who had questions about that.
And lastly, kind of tying back into the sentiment that Javier shared earlier on, you're doing all of this your work, and the data speaks for itself that Spanish-speaking families are engaged, but sometimes it really can just be to have that spoken and shared by families into the impact that it's having on them directly can really put the data into, how it's actually making a change in their lives. Can you speak to, Kirsten? I know we only have a few minutes left, but I know you said you've really appreciated seeing this feedback and how you're planning on using it moving forward.
Yeah. So these were responses to our post-event survey for the orientation presented in Spanish. And it validated that having that programming presented solely in Spanish to our Spanish-speaking families really was worth the time and effort that we put into having the presentations. The other thing that I kind of learned was, as I started looking at this, I was like, I really should have every post-event survey, regardless of whether it's specifically with Spanish-speaking families or not, available. We do have that. Our walk-in survey is bilingual, but I need to make sure that I start doing this more for post-event surveys so I can start getting more of the responses back. But being able to tell my staff, especially my student who led all of the sessions in Spanish, that, see, this really was worth the time. It really did touch people is validating.
Kirsten, I know we're coming up on time. We tried our best. I heard some of our panelists also try to answer some of the questions just naturally through the topics that we discussed today. So apologies that we were not able to get to all of the questions today, but we definitely will share our contact information at the end. And if you do want to learn more about Campus ESP, there's a live group demo every Tuesday at 2 that you can join. We're also, if anyone's going to be at NACAC, we will be there so that you can, it's a presentation, the summit event, a pre-con for to learn more about Campus ESP and how our customers are leveraging the platform. If you are already a customer, you'll get lots of best practices and learn about ways. There's even going to be a presentation from NAU about how they engage Spanish-speaking families. And then, of course, we have our blogs and resources that you can always access. And while we didn't get to the Q&A, we do have everyone's email addresses up here. We checked with all of our panelists. Everyone is willing and excited to chat with anyone who has follow-up questions. We will be sending this out, the recording after the, I'm not sure, Mel, when Mel's going to get to it, but it will be sent out later this week. And if anyone has any closing remarks or questions to share and leave the group with, I'd love to hear maybe one piece of advice, if you could give them anything.
First of all, thank you, Campus ESP, for all that you do. Gracias por todo lo que hacen ustedes. And my piece of advice, I saw quite a bit of, so if you don't have resources, can you do a translation or something? And I would say, yes, just start somewhere. What I have found is that our parents are just grateful when we show an effort that we're trying to communicate and connect with them.
Now, I want to thank everybody for coming too. I will be at AHEP, so if anybody is there, come say hello. I'd love to chat more about this. And if you have questions and you're not going to be at AHEP, just email me. I'm happy to share my journey of trying to figure this out, because it's been an interesting year as I have figured out what's working, what's not working. But like I said, don't let fear stop you from trying.
Maggie or Micheline, anything to add?
I was just going to say, I feel like both of them wrapped it up. Yeah, really nicely. Thank you so much for having us. We learned a ton from our fellow panelists. We've got like a whole jot of notes down on things that they do that we'd love to do. So we hope everybody got something out of this.
Yeah, and thank you all so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to work with us today and prepare for this panel, and always enjoy working with you as Campus ESP partners, and look forward to seeing some of the results that you'll continue to see by engaging your Spanish-speaking families. So thank you everyone for participating today. Again, feel free to reach out. We'll send the recording, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.